Thank you very much. It's ironic to see that the double snare technique was actually something that I described in '96 called the gunsight technique for tips of all things. So whenever anybody is asked to give a future talk on unmet needs, you know that the boat is already sinking. So here's my chance. How do I switch the slides? Now I have the instrument. All right, unmet needs. I'll touch a little bit on technology, education, science, practice. The references are available in the recording, so I won't try to do them in too much detail. But balloons are not enough for maturation. We still have a lot of work in terms of medications, wraps, or genes, or otherwise, and we just have a decade of various mixed and failing trials that have to be much larger viewed than just choosing best candidates one versus the other. So even something as simple as balloon maturation is still an area for substantial research. There are papers that have been trying to more methodically look about what it takes to methodically mature a fistula, and there's still a lot of room for better research than just understanding you need to do this repeatedly again and again. Catheters remain sort of an arms race of companies claiming one thing versus another. Ours is better today. Don't look at yesterday. For decades, it was just making them larger and larger on the assumption that early flow meant durability. We've learned that this does not automatically translate to a durable result, just an early one. A bigger hose does not last longer, and then talks about coatings that have not really substantiated, and now new talks about tip design that might reduce thrombosis. But we're never going to see head-to-head comparisons on a regular basis because there's no money incentive for one company to test against another one, especially when designs are constantly changing. So an antithrombotic, anti-infective coating, and even innovation is lacking. There were chemicals that could be coated or reapplied. There's an electrical catheter that would reduce thrombosis, but they haven't made it to the market for various reasons, design or money. Fistula care, once established, remains an issue, even the idea of cardiac load. And I want to make you aware of this very interesting paper that talks about the long-term consequence, the cardiovascular consequence of large fistulae that perhaps we under-recognize. So the idea of being able to modulate that over time or reduce, it's a question. So cardiovascular mortality, and with that also the idea of understanding that peripheral arterial disease and acute limb ischemia is a tremendous problem. As we start to look at the care of these patients more methodically, we should be focused on this as well, people thinking about access. Education, this is still daily decision making, and yet we're all sort of cowboys when it comes to it. I know there's a paper, but this is what I believe. Well, we have to be more like soldiers, following the evidence where it exists and stop saying, yes, but I feel. And there's a paper that looked at tips saying that we have level 1 data saying this is when you should do this for a patient, and yet when you look at the actual implementation of level 1 strategy, 7% at one hospital actually follow these guidelines and 13% at another, which means we have evidence, but we're not paying attention to it. And this great work by Ioannidis that shows that highly cited important papers are more often than not replicable. So the first and the second controlled trial may be flipped. We can't just get in line behind the beginning data because the truth wears off. The signal becomes weaker when the study is not designed just to show positivity, like drug-coated balloon industry trials and then the PAVE trial. We have to reconcile this. We can't just look here and not there. Stent grafts, the same thing. We have a lot of evidence. This is now an old story, and yet people still say, yeah, I know there's the data, but this is the first time I met the patient, so just angioplasty. So the economic papers we heard about, and this is going to be country or continent specific in terms of driving decisions that may force doctors and providers into better evidence-based practice. So we need more and more of the type of studies that we just heard about in the prior talks as well. And we need education that is going to create a constant scholastic climate where people will practice by evidence and have perhaps individual benchmarks for expertise, not just having a shop. So awareness of guidelines, for examples, pediatric access, kids are not adults. We need to be thinking about that and spreading that kind of information in the same way as adults, potentially under-recognized. So I put this up as a good paper to look at. So we need to maintain continued expectation of level 1 controlled trials where feasible in IR and replicated trials. There are many more topics to try to see through in interventional access to tell signal from noise. Thank you.